Okay. Hi, everybody. I know it's been a long time since we've seen each other, but I thought I would try and read to you the next story in our fourth grade anthology of books, which is By the Great Horn Spoon. So, hopefully, you can get on and listen to each chapter. I'm going to post some assignments that go along with the chapters, and then hopefully, you'll enjoy the story as much as I do. As you can see, sitting in my junk room right now where our computer is and trying to do this video for you. All right, By the Great Horn Spoon by Sid Fleischman. Here is the title page. I'll stop and show you pictures every once in a while. All right. Here's on the first chapter, the picture that goes with this. Chapter 1, The Stowaways. A sailing ship with two great side wheels went splashing out of Boston Harbor on a voyage around the Horn to San Francisco. Below decks, in the creaking darkness of the cargo, there sat 18 barrels of potatoes. Inside two of those barrels, side by side, were squatters. Two were stowaways. It was not once upon a time. It was precisely the 27th day of January in the year 1849. Gold had been discovered in California some 12 months before, and now, in the rush, the gold rush was on. The good ship Lady Wilma, overcrowded and heavy in the water with cargo, thrashed her way in the sea. Her paddle wheels churned and the smokestack stained the frozen winter sky like ink. She was bound for the gold fields with 183 passengers, not counting the two stowaways. Hundreds of gold seekers had been left at the deck clamoring for passage. The California fever was sweeping through the cities and towns and villages like a heady wind. Men were buying picks and shovels and trying to get away to the East Coast, to the West Coast, as soon as possible, and all at once. On the second day at sea, just after dawn, the lid rose silently off of one potato barrel. Cautiously, a man raised his eyes above the rim of the barrel and to look about. Slowly, he unfolded his long arms and long legs, and then he stood, an elegant gentleman in a black broadcloth coat. He would be the first to admit that being folded up in a barrel with a bowler hat balanced on his knees was not the most comfortable way to travel. Now he brushed off his hat and placed it smartly on his head. He took a black umbrella and hooked it onto his arm, for he never traveled without it. He pulled on a pair of spotless white gloves. He felt very nearly frozen solid, but permitted himself a most contented smile. Then he gave a small tap to the barrel next to him. "All's clear, Master Jack," he said. "Is that you, Praiseworthy?" came a young, muffled voice from the depths of the barrel. "Your obedient servant," there's a picture for you. "Your obedient servant," the man replied, and lifted the lid. There rose from his barrel a schoolboy the age of 12. He had been sucking on raw potatoes to slacken his thirst. A patch of hair fell across his forehead in a thick scribble. He had never been so cold, so hungry, or so miserable in his life. On the other hand, he had never been so happy either. He wouldn't have traded places with anyone. His pepper-black eyes were considerably brightened with his fever of adventure. He smelled of potatoes from head to toe. His thin nose was smudged and felt like an icicle, but he permitted himself a most contented smile. "We made it, Praiseworthy," he said excitedly. "Yes, we did indeed, Master Jack." Jack gazed at the dark cargo shapes that were piled high around them and listened to the scrape of the sea along the wooden hull. He thought of home and Aunt Arabella and the friendly blaze in the big stone fireplace. There was no turning back now. They were on their way to the gold fields to get their fame and fortune. "Hungry?" asked Praiseworthy. "I could eat, I guessed," said Jack, who didn't want to give the impression that he had any complaints. "Are you cold?" "I've been colder, I guess," said Jack, although he couldn't think of a time when he had been colder. "I suggest that we can see what can be done about improving our accommodations," said Praiseworthy, tapping the bowler hat firmly in place. "Shall we go?" "Go?" Jack replied. "Go where?" He fully expected to pass the voyage below decks with all the cargo. He had read that the dire accounts of treatment handed out to stowaways on ships who were at sea. "Why, to pay our respects to the captain, of course," said Praiseworthy. "The captain?" The words very nearly caught in his throat. "But he'll put us in chains, or even worse." "Leave it to me, then," said Praiseworthy, with an airy lift of his eyebrow. "Come on, Master Jack." Jack gathered courage from Praiseworthy's cool assurance. As far back as Jack could remember, he had never known anything to ruffle Praiseworthy's calm. In his black bowler hat, in his black coat, and his spotless white gloves, he was easily mistaken for a professional man. A lawyer, perhaps, or a young doctor, but he was nothing of that sort. Praiseworthy was a butler. He was a butler by breeding and by training and by choice, and more than once Jack had heard his Aunt Arabella say that Praiseworthy was the finest English butler in Boston. He had been with Jack's family since before Jack could even remember. It seemed to him that there had always been a Praiseworthy in the family. The ship gave a lurch, and the stowaways, gathering up their 2 carpet bags, picked their way through the darkened passages of the hold. Jack saw barrels of smoked fish bound for San Francisco. There were thousands of feet of lumber, enough bricks to build a hotel, and he saw boxes of rifles and 2 brass cannons. To fight with the wild Indians, he supposed. And he could make out wet bundles of grape cuttings, enough to plant a brand new vineyard. With his heart thumping, Jack followed Praiseworthy up a ship's ladder to the creaking decks above. He was sure that the captain would put them into chains, at the very least. Now the whistling of the wind came to them, and the thrashing of the great side wheels seemed as loud as thunder. He found themselves in the crew's quarters, where daylight barely even penetrated. A sailor with a gold ring dancing in his ear was filling a lamp with whale oil for light. "My good fellow," said Praiseworthy, "can you direct me to the captain's quarters?" The sailor looked up with a curious squint, and the ring in his ear did a jig. "The wild bull of the seas you want? Aye, mates." And he lifted a thumb up as a pointer. "Up there." Up there they went, climbing another ladder to another deck, and now Jack was sure that the captain would have them walking the plank. At the very least, at least. Wild bull of the seas, huh? But Praiseworthy was a match for anyone. He told himself and tried to keep a straight and firm jaw and not be afraid. They entered the main saloon, where shivering passengers were swarming like bees around 2 pot-bellied stoves. Everyone seemed to be talking at once and saying the same thing. "You've been hogging that stove long enough. I got here first. Let me in, partner." Jack saw men of every description, and some who defied even any description. There were lanky forms of farm boys in rough boots and dandies in their tight pantaloons. There were Yankees in beaver hats and Southerners in planters' hats. There were tradesmen and politicians, Frenchmen and Dutchmen, fat men and thin ones, gentlemen and scoundrels, with a woman, not a woman among them. They were bound for the gold fields, which was no place for women and children. "Give me a turn at that stove, gents. Stop pushing, sir." Praiseworthy tapped the nearest gold seeker on the shoulder, a frock-coated man with a sword cane, and inquired, "Can you please direct me to the captain, sir?" The man lifted his sword cane and pointed. Up there," he snapped, and he returned to the fray of people. In due time, after climbing another ladder, the 2 stowaways found the captain in his cabin with his door banging open and shut when the roll of the ship came. He had just come from deck with his wet oilskins lay in a heap. The wild bull of the seas, his legs apart, stood bent over a long table. He was trying to thaw the ice in his curly black whiskers over a lighted candle. "Well, don't just stand there inviting in the weather," he said in a voice that was kind of like a roaring cannon. Come in, come in." You can see part of the picture there. The butler shut the door only to have it fly open again. "Praiseworthy at your service, sir," he said. "And this young gentleman is Master Jack Flagg of Boston, who seeks his fortune in the gold fields." "Bah!" said the ship's captain, whose name was Joshua Swain, hardly even bothering to look up. It was hard to tell whether he was a good man in a bad temper or a bad man in a good temper. He had a plum nose, and he wore a long blue coat with a row of brass buttons at the side of a gold piece. The Lady Wilma pitched and rolled, and the candlestick slid from one side of the long table to the other side. Captain Swain caught it just in time before it hit the floor. "Blasted weather," he growled, "and me racing the Sea Raven around the Horn. Me, and a hold full of bricks and twice as many passengers as I ought to carry. But I'll beat that Sea Raven. By grabs, I have to throw an extra passenger overboard. I'll do it." The door banged shut, and Jack, now wide-eyed, stared at the ship's master as if he were a stout devil in brass buttons and frozen whiskers. He would sure give them a plank for sure for being a stowaway. Again, the ship lurched. The candlestick flew, but this time Praiseworthy caught it in mid-air. "Allow me, sir," he said, and he held the candle firmly under the captain's stiff whiskers. But the wild bull of the seas wouldn't stand still, and Praiseworthy was soon following him around as he paced the cabin. "Do you know what the Sea Raven carries in her cargo holds?" Captain Swain bellowed. "Miner's boots and flannel shirts and mosquito netting. Mosquito netting! She's so light in the water that her keel is even hardly damp." Then he stopped to thaw his beard over the flame, and the roar went out of his voice. "Ah," he sighed. In another moment, a smile appeared in the weathered creaks of his eyes. "That's better. Now, gentlemen, what can I do for you?" Jack exchanged a quick look with Praiseworthy, who remained perfectly at ease in this situation. "We wish to report a pair of stowaways, sir," said Praiseworthy. At that announcement, the captain's smile vanished, and he exploded again. "Stowaways!" He roared it again. "Stowaways, by grabs! I'll skin 'em alive. I'll put them in chains. Where are these stowaways?" In his fury, the captain almost set his whiskers on fire. Praiseworthy pinched out the candle. "They're standing right in front of you, sir." "Here? Where? I'll take 'em. I'll skin 'em alive and put them in chains. Stowaways on my ship. Where are they?" "Here, sir," repeated the butler, and Jack, swallowing very hard, decided to make the best and worst of it. "Standing right before you, sir," he said. It was as if for the first time that Captain Swain noticed Jack at all. "You?" he bellowed, and his plump nose was now red with anger. "Why, you're a mere jib of a boy, a lad of 10. "I'm 12, sir," said Jack. "But I can do a man's work, sir." "By grabs, you'll walk the plank, both of you," he bellowed. "If I may make an observation," said Praiseworthy, "you are obviously too civilized for such pirate tricks." "Bah!" said the captain. "Permit me to explain," Praiseworthy went on. "It was not our intention to defraud the shipping company. The moment that were posted about the Lady Wilma's departure for California, Master Jack and I were in line to buy our actual tickets. But in the push and the clamor came some clever cut-purse, and they helped themselves to our passage money, leaving us penniless, and no doubt he bought a ticket for himself and is aboard this very ship right now." "A likely story," growled the captain. "An unlikely story," Praiseworthy said, "but true. Naturally, we had no choice but to become stowaways, and I may add, it is imperative, sir, that Master Jack reach the gold fields and make his fortune, without any delay." "Bah!" said the captain again. "This California fever is spreading like the plague. New England will be left half empty in another 6 months. By grabs, anything with a keel is calling itself a gold ship and putting out to sea. Sows and rotten blooms and fishing trawlers and whaling ships, Argonauts of old, they are chasing after the golden fleece. Every man Jack thinks that he will make his fortune. Bah!" All the while Jack Flag stood quietly listening, not only to the captain, but to the icy wind in the shrouds and the ratlines. He stood straight and tried not to look afraid. He had made up his mind that he must reach the treasure streams of California one way or another, and this was certainly not the one way or another. He refused to give in to the lurking homesickness, but he found himself thinking of his 2 younger sisters, Constance and Sarah, and they were left behind in Boston with Aunt Arabella. They had surely burst into tears to find him gone and run away, and perhaps they had not dried their eyes yet. There was no help for it, he told himself. Neither Jack nor his sisters remembered their own parents at all, who had been taken away by cholera. The children had gone to live with their Aunt Arabella in the big house on the bay, with almost more rooms than they could even count. She was young and beautiful as the house was old and grand. It had been a Flagg family home for more than a century. In times past, the house had been filled with servants and guests and laughter. And the family had fallen upon hard times, though, and Aunt Arabella had to close off half of the rooms that no longer entertained guests. She or her staff would have to keep only the upstairs maid and the downstairs maid, and Praiseworthy. And then Jack had overheard Banker Stites tell Aunt Arabella that her inheritance was almost all gone. In another year, he warned her that she would be virtually penniless. Even the house with all its family memories would have to be sold. I advise you to fire your remaining servants at once, the banker had told her. You can't afford any of them anymore. But I couldn't do that, said Aunt Arabella. Why, they are like members of my own family. Oh no, I could not let them go. It was then that Jack knew that he must help Aunt Arabella. But how? At the same time, stories drifting back from California excited everyone's imagination. He had heard of men picking up nuggets the size of goose eggs and stubbing their toes on lumps the size of pumpkins. A boy could do that, even a boy not yet of 13. Without second thought, Jack made plans to run away to the goldfields. But nothing escaped Praiseworthy, and he found Jack out. Instead of informing Aunt Arabella, for he would not contest such a venture, Praiseworthy kept Jack's secret, and even more. An excellent plan, he had said to Jack. A worthy plan indeed, for he was as devoted to Aunt Arabella as to Jack himself. I'll go with you, though, Master Jack. There will be a ship's passage to pay, and I have a few banknotes put aside from my pay. And together, pooling savings, the boy and the butler had set out for the world at large together. But thanks to the light-fingered thief, the world had proved to be no larger than the inside of some potato barrels. Blast, said the captain again, standing at a porthole window. There's that sea raven, abeam of us now, standing there as if thumbing her nose at us. Jack glimpsed the other ship in the rising swell of the water. A two-masted side-wheeler, exactly like the Lady Wilma. If I may observe, Praiseworthy remarked with his perfect calm, it is a 15,000-mile voyage around Cape Horn to San Francisco, I believe. It is not the beginning of the race that counts, sir, but it's the end of the race that matters. If I win the race, I'll get command of a new clipper ship building in the yards. She'll be the pride of the seas, and I want her, sir, I want her, Captain Swain said, unhooking the brass voice tube and bellowing to the engine room. More steam! It's all we can do to keep up! More steam! He yelled. And then he turned to the stowaways. You'll work off your passage on the ship by grabs. You there, boy! Jack, who had already been standing straight as he could, stood even straighter up. Yes, sir, he said. You'll work as a ship's boy. I'll run your legs off, and that's letting you off easy. And you, sir? Praiseworthy at your service, said Praiseworthy. What in tarnation are you in that get-up for? I am a butler, sir. A butler? The captain roared. A butler? What in the name of old Scratch can a butler do? Well, it's the other way around, sir, said Praiseworthy very calmly. He took pride in what he did. There's nothing a butler cannot do. I open doors, I close doors. I announce that dinner is served, I supervise the staff, and I captain the household, much as you would do a ship, sir. The most exacting job, if I may say so. Bah! Said the captain. Jack ventured. Aunt Arabella says he's the best butler there is. She says there's no problem too big or too small for Praiseworthy. Silence, boy! A butler you are, by grabs! I know where there's a door you can open, the furnace door. You can shovel in the fuel. To the coal bunkers with you, butler. Now out of my sight before I change my mind and put you in chains and walk the plank. Sir, said Jack, trembling, I don't care to be a ship's boy. What? Roared the captain. If Praiseworthy is going to be the coal bunkers, I will shovel coal too. Jack met Praiseworthy's glance, but only for a moment. We're partners, sir. Either send me to the coal bunkers or... You got to put me in chains. The wild bull of the seas was struck absolutely speechless at this. Don't pay any attention to Master Jack, said Praiseworthy quickly. The boy is lightheaded from sheer hunger. He hasn't eaten since yesterday, and he doesn't know what he is saying. Yes, I do, said Jack. You told me yourself we'd stick together through thick and thin, together. By this time, the captain had recovered his voice, and a smile was lurking in his eye. By grabs, he said. By grabs, there's a lad with some stuffing in him. He doesn't want an easy berth, wants a man's job. All right, to the coal bunkers, both of you. Thank you, sir, said Jack, picking up his carpet bag. The captain cocked a shaggy eyebrow. It wouldn't hurt none if you stopped off first at the galley and told the cook that I give you permission to get something to eat. A man can't shovel coal on an empty stomach, or a lad either. Now, be out of my sight, now, he screamed. The door flew open and the stowaways withdrew. They descended one ladder, then another, then got their breakfast and reported to the engine room. He pointed out the boiler furnace and the coal bins and the shovels, and Praiseworthy removed his bowler hat and his white gloves and the umbrella from the crook of his arm, and they made a neat pile of their coats and rolled up their sleeves. Unless I missed my guess, said Praiseworthy, the wild bull of the seas is really a gentleman at heart. I hope he wins the race, said Jack. The stowaways set to work shoveling coal into the yellow flames of the furnace, flames that made the steam that turned the great side wheels. Jack was eager to work next to Praiseworthy, as if it brought them closer together. Sometimes he wished that Praiseworthy were anything but a butler. It imposed a slight distance between them that Praiseworthy was very careful to maintain. Jack would be happy to be called Jack, just Jack, and not Master Jack. But Praiseworthy would hear none of it, even though they were now partners and equal. Praiseworthy, said Jack, wiping the hair from his forehead. He had to raise his voice above the howl of the fire and the clank of the machinery. Praiseworthy, do you really believe the cut purse is on board the Lady Wilma? I do indeed, said the butler, digging into the bunker of coal. Shall we unmask the scoundrel? Ooh, but how? Said Jack. How? Why, I haven't the faintest idea yet, Master Jack. But between us, we'll think of something, by grabs. While the captain went on back on the deck and froze his whiskers again, and while the passengers were huddled around the two pot-bellied stoves, Praiseworthy whistled and Jack hummed a tune. They alone of the gold seekers aboard the Lady Wilma had a roaring fire to be warm next to in the side-wheeler that went splashing through the sleet and the wind and the sea towards California. And that's chapter 1. I hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to reading you the next chapter very soon. Hope everybody is well. I hope that you're enjoying your family time, and I miss you all a lot.